Hey there, thank you so much for listening to Something Super Spiritual. My name is Jeffrey Peck, and I am a psychic medium. If you are seeking conversation with loved ones on the other side, or discussion about spirituality, life after life, and anything in between, join me as we discuss all things spirit. We are collectively experiencing a spiritual awakening right now and recognizing that we are much, much more than we once believed. We don't die, and life doesn't end. We are eternal spiritual beings living in this crazy 3D virtual world of existence. Let's talk about it. Anyway, it's good to see you.
Yay, we finally made it work.
I know. Welcome to Something Super Spiritual.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really good to see you after all these years following each other. And
yeah.
I mean, how long were you in Sedona?
This time I was there just a little shy of 4 years. I had to stop
Okay.
and think a second. So, because I
Where
had
were
lived
you
there.
around 2010-ish?
Let's see, let me think here a second. I was in Sedona.
Okay,
Well,
that's what I
I
thought.
was here actually for in 2010, but then like shortly after, I think it was, let's see, January, I moved to Sedona. That's when I kind of like quit my job, my human job, as I
Yeah.
call it.
Yeah.
And I moved to Sedona for just a short time, and then I got a project in Phoenix, and so then I was in Phoenix for 2.5 years, and then I was in San Diego for 5 years,
Okay.
and then I went back to Sedona. It's like
I don't
I'm
blame
kind
you.
of
I love
backtracking again.
Sedona.
Yeah, it's a little different now. It's
Mhm.
it's it's going through some icky moments right now, but
Is it
it's
really?
oh yeah, people don't know that because they
I
see
haven't
the
been there
beauty.
for years. I've been in
Yeah,
California since 2011.
it's hopefully it's gonna heal. It just needs a lot of healing, and people are grabbing and not giving back.
Yeah.
And I think it's going through some resistance a little bit, like, oh, so I had to get out of there because the land was getting really dry, and it was just, and
Yeah.
the nature spirits and the land spirits were saying it's okay for you to go. You need to go because you're
Okay.
needed in Minneapolis for a bit. So, and there was some other stuff going on too. So I'm like, okay. So because people
Awesome.
say, wouldn't you be the perfect person to be there to help with it? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of other people there that do work like I do too, but
Mm.
I just was there for a short time. So yeah.
Speaking of grabbing and grabbing and grabbing, back in 2007, I'm gonna say,
Mhm.
I was at a Christmas party. I think it was, I'm sure it was the Christmas party 2007 with a bunch of woo-woos, a whole bunch of woo-woos, doing everything woo-woo.
Yeah.
And this one man came up to me. I'll never forget it. He was from Sedona. I was talking about how much I love Sedona, and I would go there once a month. Living in Scottsdale and Phoenix, it was just
Sure.
my happy place.
Yeah.
He told me that he moved all of the vortexes into the White Mountains because they were
Hmm.
being abused. And I was like, okay, thanks.
You did that, huh? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
God bless him.
it's yeah, it's a beautiful place. It still has magnificent beauty there, and
Mhm.
the energy is different. Used to be, as you well know, when you'd be even in the business area, it was just really illuminating.
Mhm.
It's very commercially in there, and you can feel
It's
that
that,
ick,
yes.
which is kind of the way of the world right now, but
Mhm.
you can feel that kind of ick.
Mhm.
And then when you get into like the canyons, it feels good, but not like it did when when we had lockdown and all the tourists had to leave, well, some of them, uh, it
Yeah.
kind of went back to that. And I was like, yes.
Oh, yeah.
But then once that all ended, it kind of, all that ick kind of came back,
Yeah.
and then people just started abusing, because a lot of healers don't know when they work with clients. So they regard both energetically and physically, and they don't.
Right.
There's just a lot of in this time, a lot of healers that are not properly trained, or they're in the wrong arena, as I
Hmm.
call it.
Hmm.
So it's
Understood.
unfortunate because the
Hmm.
people that are just waking up are don't know.
Right. Right.
And so they're learning bad habits, and then they probably are going out and being told that they're healers, so then they go out and teach bad habits. So it's kind of an interesting moment in time.
So why don't you let us know then? Um, what is your arena? Speaking of arenas, what is your arena within the spiritual world? I know that you do this amazing shamanistic work. I
Mhm.
know that you have this incredible relationship with the animals. I
Right.
love your posts. I mean, everything about the
Thank
animals
you. Thank you.
so is so beautiful and inspiring to me.
Yeah.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first experienced spirit and how you knew that this was your calling and where you came from?
Yeah. So it started, ultimately, you have to go way back to my birth. So
Oh,
it started, I was born with the whole interconnection, and I always say I came in with my soul blasting wide open.
okay.
So in fact, my first memory was not of my parents, not of my grandparents, but of angels around my crib. And that's a
Wow.
feeling like it was just yesterday when I recall it. And I was about 4 to 6 weeks old. And so that was my first physical earth plane memory. And then so particularly the angels were just a part of my growing up years. And I've been with them ever since, or they've been with me. And so I lived kind of a different life because I was different. So I didn't really relate to the human way as a little kid.
Sure.
And so I spent a lot of time in nature, and I had this amazing connection with nature. And I just knew from a very, very young age that everything was alive and everything was moving and we were interconnected. And then at a very young age, I started getting visitations a lot from all levels of realms.
Okay.
And so that was a little disturbing to me. And so,
When you say visitations, did
mhm.
you see them objectively with your physical eyes?
Well, I probably could have, but I was so terrified that I had this agreement, like, it's going to be like more feeling, but just knowing.
Okay.
It's like one of those things, a lot of psychic mediums talk about this. It's just as a kid, you knew something was there. You maybe didn't know exactly what the experience was, but
Right.
you knew something was there.
Right. Okay.
So I
Okay.
could just feel, and every now and then I would have a clairvoyant experience during the day, not at night,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it would be about, and it probably happened from the time I was born. Um, but I would just feel as you start to kind of relax, and just before you're ready to go to sleep, like this experience veil would open up, and it was like a parade of you name it. And so it was just very disturbing for me at that time because I had no idea, because I didn't have the psychic grandmother or any of that. It
Right.
was just
Right.
me.
Yep. Yep.
So in a sense, that helped me to build a really strong relationship with the spirit world, the angels. And then when I was about maybe around 10, I learned to have set boundaries. This is my space. This is my rest time, that kind of thing. So
Okay.
it just turned back on from the perspective of that. And then I just um, went through a lot of different, what people call dark nights of the soul, even when I was a little kid. And then trying to figure out the whole human experience. But again, I just had a real strong connection with the spirit world as well as the natural world. And it was difficult. School was difficult for me because I didn't understand why I had to be there, number one. And it was not. I could feel everybody's energy,
Hmm.
the kind of the empath route,
Hmm.
and it was very noisy because I could hear everything, even when it was supposed to be, even when it was physically quiet, I could hear all the thoughts, the feelings, the
Yeah.
guides, all of
Yeah.
that. And so that was school was difficult for me. I even had to repeat the second grade because of that, because that was at a point in time when I was like, okay, I'm done. And so I checked out that entire year. And of course,
Wow.
they tried to make it all physical.
Sure.
because I didn't even understand. And so then I kind of got back on track, and then was glad to get out of school, and then went into the the corporate perspective, the human job,
Hmm.
as I like to call it. And then just things just kept happening, and to me that was all just natural.
Yeah.
I didn't do any training or any of that. I mainly was trained by the spirit world, and it just clicked on. And then I just got to a point where I was working with a energy healer, and she kind of gave me a lot of insight, and not telling me who I was, but guiding me through this and developing my light body and looking at these experiences. And she was a lot like working with Mother Mary, because she had a really strong connection with
Oh,
Mother Mary.
beautiful.
So in sessions with her, I would have lots of visions of Mother Mary, and which I've had my whole life, but
Hmm.
more so when I was working with her. And then I just started doing angel readings, got brave enough to do angel readings in classes, and came to Sedona to attend what I thought was just an angel workshop, but it was a certification. And I wasn't really sure why I was there.
Hmm.
Um, and I just ended up helping people to set boundaries when we do breakout sessions.
Yeah.
And so then after that, the angels said, it's time for you to start teaching. This is proof of that, in a sense, in their own loving way. So then I just kind of went through that process, and then I started working with shamanism, and then I just kind of found my own way, which
Sure.
I always have.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answers your question. It's kind
Oh,
of a
that's
long,
awesome. So,
a long journey.
yeah. So when did you actually start with your classes? And was that in the 90s or were we in the 2000s?
Well, I was doing work before classes. So just to give you, in April, it'll be 20 years since I've been doing this.
Gotcha. Okay.
But there was different pieces where I was like, okay, I wasn't really teaching
Hmm.
because I didn't think I was a teacher,
Yep.
but that's kind of my thing. But um
Yeah.
so so then I went through different phases with that, a couple different phases where I was just doing practice work, and then I was taking clients for a while, and then that phase did that for quite a while, and then I did the Sedona thing and the teaching and
Mhm.
that. So mainly it was I started really teaching a lot in 2008.
Okay. Okay.
So 2007, 2008, somewhere in there.
And you're still teaching today?
I took well, that's another story in itself too. Um so I went through a really intense dark night, and another multiple phase of the shaman's death when I was in San Diego. Well, started happening for that, but around 2012 to 2013.
Okay.
And it just lasted and lasted and lasted and lasted. So about 2000, let's see, 18 or 19, I decided to take some time off, because I'd never really taken any time off,
Yeah.
and do some work. I was going to work with in my mentorship program, I was going to work with my clients in that, and teach a little bit, do a little bit of podcasting. For the most part, I needed a break,
Hmm.
because after you go through that, you've probably been through one, and I've been
Oh,
through, that was number 5 for me.
oh yeah.
And
I've
that
had
was
at
a
least two or three.
just
I'm gonna say at least.
yes, most
At
people
least.
have. And it's that one was a destiny one. And so when I was kind of through it I was just raw. I didn't have anything to give. I was ready to manifest myself out, because I had just had it.
Hmm.
It was really, really intense. Just the Dark Night itself is intense
Uh,
enough, but then the shaman's death, which I've had my whole life, and it just comes in phases like it does for
for
most
those that
people.
don't quite understand that term, what does that mean exactly?
So when someone has everybody has the shamanic nature aspect, every single person, every single animal, everything. But there are some people who have a lineage that is the opening space for the shaman. I don't use the title because I don't like titles.
Hmm.
So but what it is someone who chooses that path. It doesn't well, let me back up. You don't really choose it, it chooses you.
Right.
And you're continually going through a death process with the ego, which
Okay.
is kind of our journey. So it's kind of a double whammy. It doesn't make anybody better or anything. I don't know if I'm explaining that quite right, but it's you're just continually going through a death process of this experience and then this experience, and it's just taking more and more and more of your ego
Right.
and fading it into the background, which is kind of the normal human way, but so the ego is not connected to the work
Got it.
of the shaman or the medicine person.
Sure.
It's really just a title, sacred title.
Hmm.
And so it just continues your whole life.
Gotcha.
But it chooses you. It's not something that you choose, just like being a healer or whatever the work is. The healing realm actually chooses the person,
Right.
just like a channel or a psychic medium or shaman or
Yeah, I completely
all the
understand
titles
that.
out there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
relate to that completely, especially with
Yes.
respect to the mediumship,
Yeah.
starting out with Reiki in 2006. And that led me to hearing and sensing and feeling everybody's loved ones as I was doing Reiki treatments. And I'm like, whoa, what is going on? And then,
Yeah.
and then one thing leads you to another. Yeah, I completely
Right.
understand that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it was it was definitely a journey. And then I just took a little break. And then because I really didn't know where I was going, what I was doing. But I could still work with clients on the level that I was working with, because I learned a long time ago, the angels said, when you start working with clients, you yourself, your issues, they stay at the door. And so I
Yes.
learned that very, very early before I ever even started working with clients.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that came from spirit, because this is serious work. This is a
Yes.
responsibility. And so I just learned that really deep, I guess, is a good way to
Mm-hmm.
put it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I just, and just probably in this upcoming year, I'll start teaching again.
Oh, good. Okay.
And so there'll be more of that. So that's kind of a long answer to your
Oh, no,
question.
that's great. Uh, okay. So within this journey,
Mhm.
where did your connection with the animals
Okay.
spark up?
So yeah, that's also always interesting as well. So when I was growing up, I always had, just a really strong love and compassion for animals, of, pets and wild animals, and felt like I had a connection with wild animals.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe just what I would consider in basic terms had, once I realized I was getting messages from spirit, I realized I was getting what I would call level one intuitive messages from animals.
Okay.
Never thought I would work with animals, because I thought it was weird when I heard heard somebody do it.
Yeah.
Stephen Farmer. I was listening to
Oh,
Hay
yeah, yeah,
House
yeah.
years later, and I love Stephen.
Yes.
Um, and I was listening to him saying, he would, on his, back in the day when they were radio shows and not podcasts.
Yes.
Um, he said, he was doing a reading for somebody. Badger is saying blah 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 blah, and I was like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And but I knew that was possible.
Hmm.
And so when I was teaching, I started getting, if I had somebody I was doing a reading for in a class and they were connected, they were an animal communicator or soon to be, I would start to get these messages from animals. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then it kind of faded for a while. And there's just, again, just a complete compassion that comes from me for animals and saving animals and the whole nine yards. And then when I was in California, or actually before that, I would be in a park, just grounding, earthing, doing all that. And I would notice I would have all these animals near me: squirrels, rabbits, a fox once in a while, coyote, animals that, a
Yeah.
lot of animals that would be out in the open. So I thought, that's kind of weird, but not really. It's kind of cool. Because
Hmm.
I would look around and see other people, and that wasn't happening to them. I'm like,
You're
okay.
like Snow White.
Yeah, exactly. So then when I went to San Diego, it just seemed like they were coming in more and more closer to me. And I was having more visions of animals delivering messages through their eyes. And so that just continued, and that still
Oh,
continues to
that's
this day.
so
And then I
cool.
and then I was walking by a car one day, and this totem animal came out of this woman's, her head, like this, and looked at me, and it was a lion.
Okay.
And that kind of freaked me out a little bit, but not really. because in my life I've seen a lot of interesting things. And so I knew that was a sign. And I just kept getting something was happening. I knew something was happening. And there was just more of that pronounced. I'd go into a coffee shop, and this is when I was going through that really rough time. And my master totem animal is hawk.
Okay.
And I would see and hear far, far away a hawk as I was walking in a door of a coffee shop, just screaming at me. And so I came back out, and it was looking, it was like on a high
Oh,
pole, like quite a
wow.
ways away, and it was looking down at me. So if I was doing something, and this is how our master totems, they look out for us. If you're doing something that you're probably not supposed to, or you're thinking thoughts that you shouldn't be, because there was a
Yep.
lot of processing for me going on during that time,
Yep.
it would let me know. I was in a car one time, and we were just talking about, something that had happened, and it kind of got gossipy, which is really not my tendency, but in that time, every now and then that would happen.
Sure.
And I looked up, we were on the interstate, and I looked up, and there was a hawk like up in that direction. I just could feel it.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh my God, there's a hawk there. And I knew it was sending me the message, kind of like simplistically, knock it off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Calling you out.
But of course, they have very elegant messages and why you shouldn't be doing, what is this doing to your energy? And
Yeah.
you need to take this serious. So they would just come in a lot more and more and more and more. And then I got to a point, because I was going through a process of not really sure what my journey was with them, because I knew it wasn't animal readings, and it wasn't your totem is, which
Right.
is an important thing. And so it became more of teaching, writing, how to communicate with the animals, because at this time they weren't as pronounced. Now, if you look on social media, everybody has like animal experiences, and
Yes.
because there's such a deep connection in nature, because they have something really important to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
And most people aren't listening per se, they're just fascinated by the animal itself, which I think is
Yes.
great.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the unfolding and the memory of how to teach from the perspective, because a lot of people will say, well, they may not be tapped into their intuition or their psychic ability or their connection, but there's also ways to get the message or the communication versus looking it up on the millions of sites that are out there.
Yes. Opening up
And then,
the reference book or the
yeah, and of
reference
course
app. Mm-hmm.
and then the other piece of that, of course, is the connection to their energetic connection, and
Yes.
the power animal and the spirit animal
Yes.
perspective.
Um, totem animal, is that like a guide? Is that
Yeah,
like a
we
spirit
have.
guide, sort of?
Yeah. And you notice it a lot of times. You can look at somebody and like, oh my God, they look kind of like a lion.
Mm-hmm.
People have like jowls right here.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
usually the sense that their totem is a animal. And it's usually the animal they feel really connected to and
Right.
protective of and protected by.
Right.
But we have many. There's one in the front of your body, which is the one that looks like people, and there represents their energy.
Mm-hmm.
There's one in the middle of the body, and one at the back of the body, and to the sides of the body.
Okay.
And then we have
That was gonna be my next question. Do we have more than one? Okay.
yeah. And then when we're going through a moment, we have them in our, what I call the vortex of the body, or the landscape of the body, based on what we're working on. So I have a session that I offer, which is an animal ceremony. And that's what that one is about. I do the ceremony for the client, and then the animals all come in and create this healing story
Yeah.
that tells them exactly where they are
Mhm.
with what they're currently working on. And some of those can be totems, and some of them are just there to help.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
So
stopping by for a quick visit.
yeah,
A
here's
quick
what's
bit of support.
happening. Yeah. Here's what's happening. So yeah.
That's really amazing. I mean, spirit is amazing to me because we've got
Yeah.
so much support from the unseen world, whether it's, spirit guides as we come to know
Right.
them, or our guardian angels as we come to know them, or the
Yes.
archangels, or
Hmm.
the animal totems, or the elementals, or yeah, I mean, you go on and on and on, right? it's
Right.
it's
Right.
just um it's just amazing. I've had this unusual relationship with animals myself. You know, when I would run, deer would come up to me, like they wouldn't run away from me when I would
Hmm.
like run past them. Even if I would stop to say hello, they would just stand there, literally like 3 or 4 feet away from me.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, the hawks. And when I was in Scottsdale, I had a Gila monster like come walking at me. You know how slow they are. I mean,
Yeah.
they like molasses in January, you know. I mean,
Hmm.
they're
Yes.
so
Yes.
slow. And it just hung out. And when I was in my first Reiki weekend class, the weekend that blew me wide open,
Yeah.
and I had no idea that was coming. You know, I thought I was there to learn
Sure.
energy and how to help my mother and all that good stuff. And within the first attunement, which, you know, you're sitting there in a meditative state for
Hmm.
30 minutes or whatever, I had this experience that I had never had before. And I, in my mind's eye, was in like an energetic ethereal land, and there was a hole in the ground, and
Hmm.
I just went running over to the hole and I jumped in it and I went down.
Yeah.
And I went down. I wasn't afraid. I mean, it wasn't scary. I wasn't didn't feel like I was falling, but I felt like I was going down. And all of a sudden I
Hmm.
was in this whole new realm. And I'm walking
Right.
around and I can hear birds and I can hear animals and I can hear chirping and whatnot. And all of a sudden, behind this tree, this white wolf makes her presence walking around this tree. And her name was
Hmm.
Misha. And I
Hmm.
was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? You know? So yeah, that was my first experience with my totem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And they have a lot to teach right now. So one of the tips that I always tell people that if they feel like, well, because everybody is connected to receiving messages,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what level spirit is, the animals, is that if you're out walking and you see an animal and it is definitely looks at you, it means that's a message. Is
Mm-hmm.
focus is recall what were you pondering right before you saw that animal?
Mm-hmm.
What are you processing through? What are you connecting to? And that's usually going to
Ooh.
be your message, because that is really, really key
It's
for that
very key.
experience.
And I'm so glad you said that, because I had an experience one day when I was out running about 4 or 5 years ago. And I was running through on a trail. Out of nowhere, this wasp, I'm
Oh yeah.
running straight ahead, and this wasp like T-bones me and just smacks me right in the temple.
Hmm.
And as quickly as it T-bones me, runs into me, it stung me.
Oh.
And I was going to ask you what the message is from a wasp, or what it could be. But as you were advising, think about where you were in that moment. What were you thinking about in that moment? You know, what was going on in that moment? There was a lot of anxiety and stress and anger within my little work space that I was like running to gain freedom from.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, does that make sense with
Yeah.
respect to the
What
wasp?
side was it? Was it on the
It was
side
my
you
right
pointed
side.
to?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That would make a lot of sense. Yeah. Something I saw something similar happen to someone when I was in where was I? San Diego. I was watching this butterfly way up above, circling around. They kind of fly like they're you know carefree, or they do. And this person was on their phone, walking, focused on their phone. And so the butterfly came down almost as if the butterfly was targeting that individual, and
Right.
right in their third eye did this, ran into
Oh,
them. And they kind of just did that. And I thought, wow, that's like amazing. It was trying to get them
pay
to come
attention.
back into the consciousness, pay attention,
Mhm.
be alert. And so there's this, walking dialogue. So with the wasp, animals mean different things for people. Sometimes people get caught up and they just mean one thing, or
Right.
they all have that, but it's like there's a foundational message, and then there is the message for the person.
Mm-hmm.
So that had something to do with your eyes as well, like readjusting your visual point. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
Where you were.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you were absolutely correct on what was going on with you. So that's always the best thing to do is, what was I pondering? Where am I at right now? And that's usually related to that message of what they're trying to bring in.
Yeah. What about, okay, so as I'm out there, I had a friend of mine who wrote an article once about this sort of. It was about, are you witnessing a sign or are you witnessing a scene? As in like a scene out of a movie. Is it just something that's just happening like you're, watching a movie play out? Or is it a sign where it's like something to get your attention? And I was wondering, when you see, well, I'm just going to say it since this is in the front of my mind. My aunt and my uncle were driving up to the families for like a holiday or whatever it was. They had an 8-hour drive. After my grandmother passed, like bluebirds became symbolic for her, like when they would feel her around, and bluebirds, it was just, it was really special for them. I didn't know this until years later. But it was really special for them, and they literally like would feel her around, and they're not like never been super spiritual or talked about it. You know what I mean? So it was really cool to hear them talk about it. But they were driving this 8-hour distance, and they noticed a bluebird sitting on one of the posts, along the highway, and it flew towards them, and the car hit it. So they were like, oh, like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Does that mean anything in those moments, or is that just a scene? Like we're witnessing something playing out in a movie, or what do you make of that?
Yeah, sometimes it's just an animal being out in nature.
Yes.
Sometimes of that. Sometimes it's the to get the attention. So it's kind of like the death awareness, and to pay attention to that. This
Okay.
felt a little bit more like a scene,
Mm.
but it could have meant, depending on what they were going through, it just could be like a death process scene for them to be alert.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's so much. There's so much. If I mean, any of us can just look back at little places we were in life. 2 years ago, my partner and I were kayaking across Richardson's Bay here in the San Diego or San Francisco, and there was this seal that was following me like 10 feet behind me. And now I have this comfortable fear of the deep, the water that I can't see below. If I'm in like the Caribbean or Hawaii where I can see down, I'm fine, right? But if I can't see, it makes me panic. And as the water, we couldn't see much, but there was this seal following 10 feet behind me. And it was just following me, and it started to freak me out. I'm like, I know that's just a little seal. It's a little sweet thing. I mean, its little beady eyes are just looking at me from the water and just following me. What do you make of that?
Well, let me back up one. When you're talking about not being in water, not being able to see the depth, that's your shadow element.
Okay.
So like when we talk about the earth elements, that's water obviously is one of the elements or sub elements. So that's about being afraid to go deep with who you are.
Okay.
Especially, it seems like it's related to your work. To be able to allow yourself to go deep beyond your control. Does that make sense?
Probably.
And it could be just life too in general,
Yeah.
just because when you can't see your feet or see what's underneath you, it's the mystery and it's the unknown. And because it's dark, it's shadow. You'll probably get a lot of experience of that with that in this upcoming year, because that's kind of what that's all about.
Oh, great.
And it could be ancestral, hand down to of that level. Yeah.
So was the seal just like stopping by to say hello?
So it was in back of you,
It was behind me. Yep, just following me.
behind you. Yep,
Mm.
yeah. Usually the seal represents, it has, the so do you feel very connected to the water? I mean, in general,
I love to be at the water. I
and the
have to be
animals in the
near the
water?
water. Yeah. Oh
Animals in
yeah.
the water.
Hmm.
Okay. So that's usually a seal is it's kind of like a squirrel in a sense. It has that real playful energy,
Yes.
but it also represents for you, because it's different for everybody, represents flow. So it's kind of
Okay.
interesting. You mentioned the thing about the water and the shadow,
Yeah.
and this is about being deeper in flow with
Hmm.
who you are.
Hmm.
And so
Okay.
that's kind of just a basic run of
Sure.
it, but it's about being deeper in flow.
Mm.
And so, and not being afraid of that.
It's a great touch point. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do some meditation on this when we're done here. This is
Hmm.
thank you. This is really great. So one more thing about the water, since I just had this memory
Hmm.
when I was 18. My friends and I took an RV and drove it from Phoenix to I think Baja, California, down there in Mexico.
Hmm.
And when you're standing in the water, like the water's up to your shin, right?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
wave comes in and it goes up past your knee, and then it goes out and it's down by your ankle. And then it comes back in and it's up past your knee, and then it goes
Yeah.
down, it's by your ankle. Now, this particular day, there was the seaweed, the kelp
Oh
that
yes. Oh
was
yes.
around, and you look down and you see this dark things going by you, and it's like, okay, no big deal. I happened to look down as the water was going out,
Hmm.
and I looked down and I saw this dark thing go around my ankle, my right ankle.
Right. Right.
And I just thought it was just kelp. And so I'm shaking my leg, and I felt weight. And I thought, that's weird. So
Yeah.
took a step, I felt weight. So I lifted my foot out of the water. It was an octopus wrapped around my ankle.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And I panicked.
Yeah.
What did the octopus have to tell me in that moment?
Well, octopus is really interesting because they have 8 hearts, and that connection is kind of like going up steps. Sometimes like Carolyn Mace, she talks about, like, when you're talking about your own consciousness, she talks about the building, you're on the bottom floor, you're kind
Yep.
of in ego, and as you
Yep.
move up to the penthouse, you're kind of in that. So I always look at octopus is the level of heart connection. You're elevating the heart alignment.
Ah.
And so, but I felt like that because it wrapped around you, it was to cleanse the connection to your heart,
Oh.
cleanse the connection to the awareness, because it's wrapped around and has those tentacles, and
Hmm. Hmm.
but it had a lot for you, it had to do about cleansing. So it's about the heart connection, because the hearts were coming in first, and that's about cleansing the moment. You were how old at that time?
18.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
really beautiful.
yeah.
So how can people tap in and tune in to the nature spirits, the animal spirits, the messages from the animals in nature in everyday life? Like, there's a lot of people that
Hmm.
live in cities where
Hmm.
there's not a lot of nature they can get to. I mean, sure, there's probably
Yeah.
a park, a
Yeah.
city park,
Yeah.
but what do you have to say about that?
Well, they can mentor with me. No,
Okay,
um,
well, that's good.
that's one. No, it's really important when you're, no matter what level you're connecting at, is to find that place of stillness and some sort of meditation. And I know people will try to use the excuse that I can't meditate, I can't meditate. I've been
Mhm.
teaching meditation for most of the 20 years I've been doing this work, and I've yet to meet a person that can't
Yes.
meditate. It's just more about clearing, but it's more about going, nowadays it's about going into nature or finding some type of practice, where you're learning to be still. Lots of guided meditations all over the place on the internet,
Right.
um, and being able to connect out. And then what I always tell people, just as when I used to teach a lot about connecting with angels, is pick an animal you feel really connected to and just feel their vibration, their essence, their experience. Because before long, you'll start calling on the spirit of that animal, especially if you feel a connection to it. And
Hmm.
you'll start to get the characteristics of it and the feeling of it, and just go through different animals that you feel connected to and relate it. And then you can, just like we do with any multiple level of guides, we ask questions,
Hmm.
and you have to be willing to, of course, get out of the way, so you're not creating the answer but feeling the answer. And then there's just that level of trust. But
Hmm.
the most important thing now is, if you have the option to go sit in nature and be in that stillness, or some type of meditation practice, is you're then understanding your own energy system, because it really has to do, any level has to do with understanding your own energy system, how you're communicating, how your energy system is unique to you.
Right.
And that's usually how the any level of spirit's going to come in, but the animals are going to relate to that. So it's very important to just find that level of silence and stillness, and I talk a ton about that
Okay.
on all levels, because that's where you really start to feel it. But that practicing with an animal you feel connected with, and then practice with that animal for a while, and then switch to a different animal, so you can start to feel their connection and their essence, and being able to let go. So you're
Hmm.
not like, okay, I'm focusing on bear, what is the bear going to react to? Of course, that's not the route. You just want to feel the essence of the animal, and that stillness place will bring that experience in.
They'll inform you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They're great teachers.
So right now, because we're smack in the middle of the holidays,
Mm-hmm.
Hanukkah is happening, Christmas is happening, Thanksgiving just passed, New Year's Eve is next weekend. A lot of people find the holidays really difficult
Mm-hmm.
and lonely,
Right.
stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what advice might you have for people in this period? They're either maybe they're lonely, they're grieving, they lost a loved one recently,
Mm-hmm.
sometime this year or
Mm-hmm.
during COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, or they're, having anxiety because they are dealing with the family. It's like who
Right.
was it that somebody said, if you think you're enlightened, spend a weekend with your
Oh
family.
gosh. Yeah.
um, yeah. What do you have to advise, like with respect
Well,
to animals?
when we've lost someone, I think it's really important to remember the connect to the memories of maybe during the holidays, connect to that aspect of what's happening instead of the loss. You definitely want to, as I talk about on multiple levels, always about grieving. Grieving takes as long as it takes for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but during this time, it's important to remember those particular holidays. I had one of my aunts just crossed about two months ago, or not
Oh,
2 months ago,
okay.
about a month and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was always very festive during the holidays, and we always went to her house for Christmas, and so I've been just really focusing on those memories versus her not being here. And I mean, I kind of look at, as you do too, death a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
but when you don't, it's just recent. It's about focusing on those, but also remembering that strong connection.
Mm-hmm.
Or when you do have, on the opposite perspective, or maybe not opposite, but where your family stresses you out. And one of the things that I always remind people is, and I know that in America this is kind of a strong statement, but you don't have to see family,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes that causes more pain than actually seeing your family. Sometimes people need that permission.
Yeah.
Because I remember I used to say that a lot several years ago, and people are like, "Thank you,"
Yes.
because I feel like it's a responsibility, because it's in the culture, so to speak, around the world, not just here. But it's important, if it causes you more stress, and it's possibly even affecting your health, you don't have to see family,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm.
find physically find ways that are not going to be where you're not spending so much ample time with certain family members,
Yeah.
or find other traditions and things of that nature.
Are there animals that can ease that experience if they called
Well,
on a animal totem?
I mean, all animals
Oh,
It's not just one particular animal.
oh,
Usually,
sure. Okay.
you're gonna feel connected to your totem animal, and that's gonna give you. Um, but I always remind people too of the angels during this time of year because they help you with comfort, and if there's a particular archangel that you feel connected to, and because they can really help you with that,
Hmm.
because they're always able to help teach you about how to come into fullness with your own energy in
Yes.
those moments, to raise that vibration, like we're talking about the building, like come up to the penthouse
Yep.
and just be who you are. So, and just finding, and of course they've always got the love message for you, but the depth of who you are, they'll
Yeah.
teach you how to remember who the source of really who you are.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What do you find the difference? Speaking of angels, what do you find the difference between angel energy and totem energy? Is there really a difference?
There is, because one is earth and one is more
Well, I
celestial
was going to say
spirit.
celestial. Yep. Yep.
So upper world is what we use in shamanism, and so it could go together. It's very powerful. But the animals are more underworld, earthly, spirit animals. When they're not working with us, they're in the
Hmm.
spirit world.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit different. It feels quite a bit different. So you can't take like an animal message and take it for an angel message, because it'll be completely different
Right. Right.
because of the earth
Understood.
connection
Yeah.
and all that. So
So where can people find you, Eddie?
the best place to find me is on my under construction website right now, but at eddiemullins.com. So we're building a new website. So, but you can still access me on my website, and
Okay.
I'm doing sessions, and I have a mentorship program that's 10 weeks long, one-on-one.
Awesome.
So it's really set up for people who are ready for that next level.
Okay.
And so my style is I help you to uh, instead of saying, here's the system, I don't do systems, we work with their energy system. Where are you being guided to? And that's what we work on, is getting them to go deeper and deeper into their journey and their calling. And I think that's so important in this time, is to really look at our own calling instead of, I want to do what they're doing, or I want to do what they're doing. I mean, you can kind of model that,
Sure.
but you have to find your own style. There's just a little bit too much of that. Here's how you should feel. Here's how you should be. Here's what you should do. And
Yeah.
that's damaging to the collective.
Agreed.
So I do one-on-one sessions as well, and then I'm going to be offering a few more things that are more shamanic, but I'm going to be jumping into medical intuition too. That's more of a shamanic medical intuition, and then and some ceremony work, doing a lot of ceremony work, and then of course the mentorship program, and I'll be
I,
teaching too.
I
So
love the ceremony work.
it's so powerful.
It
I
is.
wish more people would do it. It's
I
just
love it.
beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, give me some crystals to throw in a grid and anything to
Yeah.
burn and smoke and whatever, and I'm
Yes.
good.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I was out on the land yesterday. It was really cold here yesterday. It was like -3. And so I had to go out on the land, and I was doing an animal ceremony, and then I was doing a ceremony for one of my medical intuitive clients, and then a couple other things too. So it's just really ceremonies are really powerful because it really gets into the energy of the client, and it's very nurturing. And then and with some of those sessions, I come back and then I do the session, then we bring in the information that came through the ceremony, like the
Mm,
animal ceremony. So, but ceremony work is very, very powerful. I think
agreed.
more people need to do it. It's not new, but it's, for a lot of people, it is new,
Yeah,
because
it's
like,
so not new, right?
what is that? How does that work? And then,
Hmm.
there's multiple different ceremonies. So
Yeah,
yeah,
there's just something about ritual and the whole process
yeah,
of the ceremony that is just
yeah.
so like feeling like it's tactile for me. You can feel it
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning to the end. You
Mm-hmm.
can feel that work being done and that
Yeah,
healing being done. And
yeah,
it's just it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
yeah. Yeah, because when I was in Sedona, I was inside of a tree, standing next to a trunk, doing a ceremony for a client, and I was using a rattle, and I felt this expression coming in, and I'm like, this is for me. This isn't for the client. So it was just kind of interesting, and this golden eagle flew right over top of me. And in Sedona, in that area, geographically, golden eagles are not common
Uh-uh.
at all.
They're not.
And that's the first one I'd ever seen, like physically. And so it was just like, and it was very emotional for me because it was a message of the Christ light that was coming through
Yeah.
the golden eagle. And so it just like, wow. But that's the kind of things that happen in those when I do those animal ceremonies, these
Mm-hmm.
animals just start to come in. When I first started doing those, and I had been doing animal ceremonies inside of sessions for years, but I decided to offer it because it's what I was guided to do.
Yeah.
And as soon as the client gave the permission, the animals just come in energetically and physically, just come right
Oh,
in, and
that's
and
so
it just
cool.
creates this beautiful healing story for the client that shocks me and them when we're together.
Sure.
So it's quite powerful. Yeah, animals are very interesting. Those ceremonies are very, very deep. I'm still always shocked, even though I've been doing those for a while.
Isn't that the truth? I totally get that.
Yeah,
I mean, there are, with every reading that I do,
yeah,
I come out amazed, like,
yeah, yeah.
wow, and touched and just yeah, yeah, that childlike wonder and
Hmm.
childlike awe, I just hope it never leaves because it is just
Right.
so special.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Over the years, people sometimes feel like they're not connected to spirit, or but it's just that trust level
Mm-hmm.
and just being in the presence. And it's kind of like, for me, it's like putting puzzle pieces together sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you'll get this piece and this piece, and it makes you stop and ponder, like, is that a message?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, here comes this piece. Because I had an experience when I was in San Diego. When I was growing up, my grandmother lived next door to us, and I was super close to her. And she passed when I was 21. And the song that I picked to play at her funeral was Wind Beneath My Wings, because
Okay.
I felt like it represented our relationship, because she was always there. And so I was in San Diego, and I was getting ready for the gym, and I'm just like packing my gym bag, and I'm just kind of like had a lot going on that day. And I kept getting my third eye kept like, and after a while, it looked like someone was getting hit by a car.
Uh-oh.
And just to back up a little bit, she was killed in a car accident. And so I kept getting this image that I thought looked like a car. And I could feel it was the angels. And I was just kept packing my bag, and it kept coming in a little clearer and a little clearer. And then I got a deeper glimpse. And I'm like, is that me almost getting hit by a car? And so I was like, I better pay attention
Yeah.
because I was walking to the gym. And so I go out of the building, with my workout bag, and I randomly put my headphones in, randomly hit one of the players. Wind Beneath My Wings started to play randomly. And so I'm like, okay, that was interesting because I picked that song. She was killed in a car accident. So I cross the street, I get to this busy crosswalk, get halfway through. Here comes this car, driver not paying attention at all. It's in the moment I could have jumped out of the way,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm like, are you kidding me? And so he did stop because something snapped his attention, and then he like slammed on his brakes. But he was like probably a ways away. I could have jumped out of the way, but it's like little things like that where, like, okay, we're being watched over, we're being guided, we're being protected. The sign was there. I received what was happening. But then there was a part of me is like, no, that can't be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when those cars started coming at me, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of real.
It's so true. We are never alone. We're
Right.
never alone. We're
Right.
always watched over. Our crossover loved ones are always right here.
Yep.
And for you to say, no, it can't be, we always go for the logical override immediately.
Yep.
Even when we've been doing this work for decades,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. If it's for other people,
happened.
I'm like, oh yeah, this is what's coming in, this is what's unfolding. But sometimes with ourselves, we're like, well, it's just that human like first floor.
Yes, first floor. Who that first floor?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, Eddie, thank you so much for being here. This has been absolutely amazing. Do you have any last words of advice for people?
Yeah, it's really important in this time as we head into next year. Next year is going to be they're all illuminating, but next year is going to be a lot of shadow. That's a different type of shadow, that's deeper. And so it's really important to start, if you haven't already. Shadow work is a big part of our journey, but it's important to start doing the shadow work, if not for yourself, for humanity, because everything we do is for the collective and humanity. And
yes,
but it's important because there's going to be ancestral shadows, which are just simply patterns, perhaps, that have been handed down in a shadow level of something that happens. And then our own individual shadows are going to be front and forward. And there's going to be a lot of greatness that happens next year too.
Why is that? What is it about next year? Is it numerologically something, or what is it about next year?
Just the time.
Oh,
it's just the time. Yeah. And then somebody reminded me, I forgot what the number, how they figure out the number, but it was like deep. And usually anytime we have a numerology number or whatever that comes up and where it's deep, it means shadow. Usually the shadow is the one that comes in. So it's time to remove ourselves from the surface and start to dive deep. And it's just the time of that. It's appropriate time for that. So it's because a lot of these forecasts can come in with astrology and everything, but if we're not where we need to be collectively, it can't happen because the vibration is off, because we create the collective. And so that's just an important piece, because the more you start to do your work instead of trying to mimic somebody else or let somebody else tell you who you are or your destiny, that actually doesn't do you any good. So it's more about diving deep into this space and recognizing you have to do your work first and then share that with humanity, instead of I'm here to help all these other people, but then my life is a mess. It doesn't really work that way. So it's we all have our part. Yeah.
Well, beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you again for listening to the Something Super Spiritual podcast. If you know someone who would enjoy this episode, please do share it with a friend. For show notes, links, and to purchase a mediumship reading, my website is somethingsuperspiritual.com. You can also easily subscribe and follow the show on your favorite app, sign up for my newsletter for bonus content, and to keep the conversation going, you can easily join the Facebook community. It's all right there at the website, somethingsuperspiritual.com. Signing off for now, namaste.